being closed, consulates and so on. Can you talk a little bit about what people around the world can actually expect?
Well, I can't speak to, it's a very separate issue, right? This is an organizational roadmap for this department here, right, in Washington, D.C. The arguments about what will occur in other countries, you're talking about embassies and consulates, that's not addressed here. It's not a factor that this reorg doesn't affect them, except, as I've mentioned, is more involvement, right? More direct, person-to-person framework as opposed to bureaucracy to bureaucracy. No more calling up USAID and going through, 17 messages and trying to get an answer back about what's happening with a certain grant or what's happening with a certain plan. That this is really, in a way that I think I've heard many people here note, including the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary, of returning the State Department to its traditional base, to the nature of human diplomacy, of getting things done, and my goodness, especially in the 21st century, that moves so rapidly, faster than any other time in history. And this is what the State Department used to be able to do. It has grown, as the Secretary's statements indicated, quite bloated, unable to move, stuck in really just a bloated inability bureaucratically to make decisions or to get things done. And if decisions are made, the levels that have to be gone through extend the amount of time to where you can get a decision made. So I would say for embassies and consulates in the world itself, as they're already seeing when it comes to the way that President Trump operates, the way that Secretary Rubio operates, it's about faster results with, I think, a more nimble effort. All right. Yes, Humaira.
Thank you, Tanya. So in the reorg, we see that the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, Human Rights, as known as J inside the State Department, seems to have been eliminated, and some of the bureaus under that is being brought under different undersecretaries. But, for example, Office of Global Criminal Justice, which works on monitoring atrocities overseas, which cooperates with different governments on war crimes accountability, seems to be completely eliminated. So I'm wondering, this undersecretariat was a place where U.S. basically did democracy and rights promotion globally. Does the new State Department under President Trump no longer sees that as a mission? Is that no longer a priority?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a legitimate question. Again, we've grown used to seeing something, and then that would indicate that's where that lives, and if that's gone, the effort is gone. Many times during the USAID argument, I've made that argument. Just because the USAID building was going to be something else doesn't mean, or that the certain aid was cut that was not aligned with our vision or President Trump's vision, doesn't mean that our commitment to foreign aid ended. So you're right. There are going to be certain offices and certain bureaus that are going to be gone or folded into other bureaus. I would say this is one of the most important aspects of this for everyone in the building and everyone watching at home. Because you might have had a specific bureau that dealt with a discrete issue, doesn't mean because it's now folded into another larger bureau, doesn't mean that it's gone or we don't care. It means that, in fact, certain issues deserve to be considered part, not like some specialized, separate, segregated interest. Why shouldn't that interest be in every bureau, right? If you've got bureaus that, and for people watching at home, as I mentioned, I think in my very first briefing, that the State Department isn't just a bunch of people at a desk looking at the internet and people figuring out what it is they want to say to a world leader. There's bureaus filled with people who care about the country, the State Department, and are experts, researchers, individuals who are committed to a certain region, who understand it, who have also, though, the relationships with people in the countries in that region. And then they inform us. They do the research. They inform me for this briefing. I go onto the screen, and it's every bureau in this building that has what we call lines, which is the information about what's happening on an issue. They tell me what those things are, why it matters, etc. So I come here, and a great deal of what I say to you, if not most, is from the body of knowledge from the people who work in this building, who are the Foreign Service officers, the career people, the career people, the civil service officers and workers who are here. So that's how this, it is the government as a whole is people. It is a collection of people who've gathered to further the founders' vision, and who with each election gather to further the vision of the person who leads this government. So when we think about the nature of USAID or those other bureaus you mentioned, if a bureau is gone, that is certainly all these issues are important. It means that we're looking at certainly blending in with the regional bureaus, taking certain issues away from being specialty issues, and making sure that they're in the frameworks of the bureaus so that they can be weaved in and dealt with as a whole within all the work. Yes, of course. Please. No, next, once we get through this.
I do have a follow-up on this too.
Okay, then. Hold it, but I'll make sure I give it to you guys. We're good.
You said earlier that, you talked about some of the programs and you described them as, the aims of the programs were not in line with the aims of the country. Now, there are countries, like U.S. has made democracy promotion a priority, but that priority actually did not go down well with some of the countries in the world. So if a country, for example, a lot of people would give the example of Hungary, U.S. has funded some independent media organizations in Hungary. If those are in contradiction with Hungary's goals, the U.S. is no longer going to do that.
No, it's not. Without, of course, speculating on what we would do in a particular country, the point is that American tax dollars that are sent as aid or to supplement something in another country deserves to be used to reflect the values and the interests of the United States, which of course is democracy and freedom around the world. I think it's safe to say that with all of our actions, certainly the Trump administration, we have made it clear that that is our priority. But also making sure that the ambassadors who are also appointed, who are representing this nation in countries and others who work at the consulates, in concert with the nation that we are working with diplomatically, that we have a coalition, if you will, on knowing how that money is being spent and making sure that the stakeholders actually have a say. I think that's fair. Some people would argue that sending money into a country, spending on something that nobody else discussed, like as USAID would do, is unfair, and that the people in the country that we're working with should have a say. But bottom line is, this now moves into something that is more accountable, more specific, easier to describe, easier to ask questions about, and easier effectively for everyone involved here at the State Department and at the embassies and consulates involved, more accessible and more transparent. All right. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on Humera on global criminal justice, because
Sure.
there seems to be a bit of a mixed message, because on the one hand, this is clearly being eliminated from the organisational chart. But when we're pressing you on it, you're saying...
Well, it may be moved. I mean, if you don't see it on the chart, it may be moved.
But and then the Secretary has retweeted an article which says very specifically that this is an aggressive shake-up. It will close agency offices, including those launched to further human rights, advance democracy overseas, counter extremism, and prevent war crimes. So it's just a simple question, really. Is the investigation and prevention of war crimes overseas still an important piece of work and a priority for the State Department?
Democracy is always important, obviously, and again, and I understand the tendency. War crimes, again, for me, being here now, we're approaching about 100 days. My deciding to do this is based on this nation's history, and it clearly is committed to the nature of the values of the American people and of this country. And just because, and this is why I think it's difficult to do, you've seen a bureau dedicated just to that, just because it has been folded into a different bureau or is an element underneath a different kind of office, and that particular bureau that was maybe specialized, which could be implemented in a better, more nimble, faster way, especially when we're talking about war crimes and things immediately that are moving on the ground. This is the kind of adjustment and reorganization that makes it better. and this will always be the argument. This will be seen. But it is, of course, those values that are American values remain. And while the approach or the bureaus or an office might be called something differently or even eliminated as an office, but is moved through the bureau as a whole, you'll see that the American approach to the world not only remains the same, but will be more obvious, more clear, more dynamic, and more active.
Do you know where will that role move to? Because it's very hard to see in the chart, for example, on war crimes or global criminal justice, where that will now exist.
Well, but again, this is a roadmap. It is a plan. This is something that in this process, and there is a process